Hello and welcome to the Dental Protection Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Noel Kavanagh, and in this podcast, we're bringing you previously popular conversations concerning various junctures or periods in a typical dental career journey. My own professional background is in general dental practice, where I worked for over 20 years as both an associate and principal dentist in the UK and Ireland, and I now work full-time as a senior dental educator in Dental Protection's risk prevention team. In this episode, I was joined by Dr. George Wright, who is a dental legal consultant and also a Deputy Dental Director of Dental Protection. And we discussed the first chapter of a dental career, the early days after qualifying. We explored some of the challenges, some of the potential risks, and also some risk management strategies to help listeners navigate through this early stage of their dental career.
Thanks, Noel. Delighted to join you and really looking forward to hearing your thoughts and views on the early years after qualifying. I'm really looking in particular to exploring some of the challenges, potential risks and some of the risk management strategies to help our listeners navigate through this stage of their dental career.
Certainly, George. I mean, obviously, qualifying from dental school is a significant event in any new graduate's personal life. A new chapter, I suppose, the beginning of a professional career. I think that once the dust has settled and after the excitement and euphoria of getting through your finals, there are probably some important questions to consider before you make any decisions about your future career.
Yes, no, totally agree. So what questions did you have in mind in particular?
Well, I think one of the first decisions concerns your first paid dental job. Would you like to join a general dental practice as a self-employed dentist? And, if so, and given a choice, where and what type of practice? Or perhaps you'd prefer a salaried position in the community services, the HSE, or perhaps even within a dental hospital, a teaching hospital. For some, they're tempted to travel and maybe go overseas and seek a job in another country. So these are just some of the questions to be answered. And, you'll have to consider the pros and the cons of each.
Yeah, so in the UK, we have foundation training. It used to be known as vocational training. So is that an option to dentists in Ireland?
No, unfortunately, foundational vocational training is not currently available in Ireland. Therefore, for many new graduates starting their professional careers, working as an associate in a practice setting is how they start. And this can seem quite daunting. Suppose the safety net of support from, undergraduate clinical tutors and their peers is no longer available. And therefore, they have to ask themselves whether they feel, that the support is needed and how frequently maybe, you're likely to use it. And that can certainly influence your decision with regard to what type of practice you join and what level of support is available from the practice team. For some starting out, it could be as an associate working alongside their principal, probably, the traditional model. Others may begin their professional journey in a practice owned and are operated by a non-dentist. And certainly something to consider very carefully before accepting any job offer, I think, is the potential support structure that will be available to you.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more, Noel. I think having a support structure in place can be really helpful in those early steps into your career. So let's have a look at that support structure. Any tips, Noel, on how you can assess that? What does a good support structure look like?
But I think a good starting place is to look at the range of skills of existing team members, particularly whether established colleagues are going to be willing to support and coach you as you settle into the world of general practice. There are certainly differences between working in a small practice that offers, general dentistry and perhaps working in a larger practice where there's, both generalists and specialists on site. The multidisciplinary environment, it potentially offers a different perspective and experience as you'll be able to gain, I think, insights into the world of specialist dentistry. But, definitely clinical decision-making and treatment planning without a tutor peering over your shoulder, it can feel quite liberating at first, but, certainly for lots of others, it can be quite daunting and potentially even leading to self-doubt. As we kind of remember ourselves in a dental school environment, you're used to having treatment plans scrutinized and approved by, clinical supervisors and tutors. And suddenly you're charged with the responsibility of, your patient's safety and welfare. And that can certainly, I think, be, more than a little nerve-wracking, and it can take time before you feel confident and comfortable in the role. So I think, it's definitely at this point that the benefit of working alongside supportive colleagues can really come into its own. So, having the ability to literally knock on the surgery next door and run a treatment plan or a radiograph perhaps by a colleague can, prove invaluable. So, having those senior colleagues available to assist you with perhaps a difficult extraction maybe, or, even support with a challenging patient is definitely a benefit I would suggest not to be overlooked.
Yes, and I can certainly agree. When I started out in my career, having someone to come out and assist you with a difficult extraction was certainly something that I found extremely valuable. So thinking about where it all started, Noel, how and where did you start your own dental career?
Well, I qualified from Dublin, from the Dublin Dental University Hospital. And I think like many of my classmates, at the time, back in the mid-90s, upon graduation, I moved to the UK. My first job was in a lovely NHS general dental practice down in Banshead, Surrey. It was a 4-person practice, including a very supportive principal. I can still vividly remember the support I needed and thankfully got from my more senior and experienced colleagues and my principal in those early days. And, it's definitely something that I'm forever grateful to them for.
So apart from the support and mentoring, which we've briefly touched on there, what other considerations do you think are important?
Well, I think it's prudent from the outset to clarify and understand the business expectations. As we know, the business of dentistry is inextricably linked with the clinical side of things. It's important to understand if the practice owner or owners, if they have any financial expectations, and to ensure that you're comfortable with them and that they don't pose a threat to ethical working practices. Some new graduates, unfortunately, may inadvertently find themselves in a situation where there is pressure and pressure to hit certain financial targets or other KPIs or key performance indicators. KPIs and other metrics, they're an integral part of practice management, but they shouldn't become targets because, the problem is if they do, then they can potentially drive the wrong behaviors and therein lies the risk, because if combined maybe with a low associate percentage or a sliding scale of remuneration, the consequences can be the temptation or pressure to carry out what are termed, high value treatments, this acronym, the HVTs that we hear about, such as implants, cosmetic dentistry or short-term orthodontics, without the requisite training and experience, I would say.
Thank you, Noel. So can I take it that really reflecting on what we've been saying, the take-home message is that not all jobs or practices are equal, and really to think very carefully about taking the first job you're offered?
Yeah, absolutely, George, completely.
Okay, so when you found that position, so you've gone through the stress of getting through dental school, of finding a job that you think's right for you. What practical things do you think are important for your very first day?
Okay, I think it's important to orientate yourself with the practice policies and procedures ahead of your first day seeing patients. So examples might be, do you understand the practice procedure for dealing with a medical emergency, let's say, or where the emergency drugs are kept? Maybe, what is the practice complaints procedure? What fee structure is applied to patient care? These are all questions that should really form the basis of your induction, preparing for when you meet and greet your first patient. I think it can be helpful to have a list of questions for your new colleagues at the practice to ensure that you do have all the information you need to start delivering safe care from the outset. Certainly one of the biggest changes from dental school, or even indeed moving practices for that matter, can be the changes to things like dental materials, instruments, labs, local referral routes. It's also quite possible that you'll be using a new software package for clinical record keeping and or radiographs. And I think just having the ability to orientate yourself to the new systems ahead of your first day can really help ease the pressure and help you to get to grips, with your new surroundings. Similarly, dental materials may differ. And I think just taking the time to understand, things like the manufacturer instructions of use, for the common materials that'll certainly save you time and indeed stress when you first come to use a particular material.
Okay, thanks, Noel. So, we've probably all got different ideas of what some of the biggest challenges are starting a new practice. I'd imagine perhaps one of the biggest shifts when starting out is getting to know a new group of patients. Would you agree with that?
Definitely. And that, I think, in and of itself throws up its own challenges. Patients may come with existing expectations based upon, I think, previous interactions with colleagues maybe at the practice. So taking time to get to know your patients is really key and critical to providing excellent care. It's often been said that a poor clinician who is a good communicator has potentially fewer problems than a good clinician with poor communication skills. As I'm sure you'd agree yourself, George, at Dental Protection, we often see complaints that relate not necessarily to the specific clinical treatment provided, but to failure in communication, and that leading to a breakdown in the professional relationship between the dentist and the patient. It could be things like concerns that informed consent wasn't obtained, maybe treatment charges were unclear or weren't explained at the outset, or that the patient perceives their care was rushed or uncaring. So I think taking time from the outset to build a rapport, to that bucket of goodwill that we talk about with your new patient can really pay dividends in the long run. It's also, I think, just worth signposting that Dental Protection offers a range of communication skills training courses. And some of the topics are managing adverse outcomes, consent, and the principles of shared, decision making, and effective communication, as well. And these courses are available free of charge as a benefit of membership, and you can access them via our website, the dentalprotection.org.
Thank you, Noel. So can I ask you what you think the main challenges are in relation to gaining clinical confidence and competence in newly qualified dentists and practitioners?
That's a really good question, George. New graduates, I think, can sometimes be asked to provide treatments outside their, confidence or competence. And that can be either by patients or even colleagues within the practice. As we often say, a really essential, tenet or pillar in clinical risk management is both recognizing and then working within your clinical competence. And that, I think, requires a certain level of personal insight and even, I would say, emotional intelligence. The oft quoted Dunning-Kruger effect is just, that's just one example of a cognitive bias that affects our perception of the world around us. But, on a practical level, just causing people to believe that they're more capable than they really are. And unfortunately, they don't yet have the knowledge, experience, or understanding to recognize their own incompetence. So, suffice to say, there's absolutely no substitute for knowledge. And I think it was Confucius who said many moons ago that, real knowledge is to know the extent of one's ignorance. So, definitely really important to get and garner this knowledge. And, certainly it might be worth considering for, dentists in the early years, the benefits of further education opportunities and, availing of high quality, accredited courses for these more complex treatments that we've mentioned.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, Noel. I think this concept of, when you graduate, you are the finished product. I think, we need to encourage colleagues to recognize that really all you're doing is starting out on that journey. There's an opportunity to build up your skills over time. And, as you've said, take on the more straightforward cases while you've got that support of a clinical mentor. Certainly, I know myself from chatting on our advice line and from supporting our new dental graduates that it's not unusual for them to have some or indeed all of the feelings of being overwhelmed, perhaps struggling with clinical time pressures, or perhaps trying to keep up appearances of coping well. So just before we wrap this up and bring this episode to a conclusion, perhaps you might share some tips for our listeners around that.
Yeah, certainly. I think during the early days, it's extremely important to maintain a healthy work-life balance. Certainly, can't stress enough the importance of having a support network around you. I think that'll be, key to help, to decompress after maybe a challenging day in the surgery. Attendance at professional networking events, such as our own annual Dental Protection Conference, things like that can provide excellent opportunities to meet colleagues from across the profession. And I think to build your network in a relaxed and supportive environment. And finally, I think it's really important to say just, to have the courage to reach out for help if you're finding your journey stressful or find yourself in need of someone to talk to. I mean, Dental Protection operates a dental legal advice line. It's available 24/7 for any emergencies. Also, you might wish to have a look at the range of well-being resources, that are available on our website. And above all, I think just remember that, in Dental Protection, we're, with you all the way on your journey. And we want it to be an enjoyable and hopefully a fulfilling experience because, we know how important that is to you.
Thank you, Noel. I think that's a great opportunity to say thank you to you for sharing your thoughts. As always, practical advice, as I think we've come to expect. Thank you for listening to this podcast. We hope you've enjoyed it. And if you have, please do tell your friends and colleagues. We're always interested to hear from you, and do let us know if you have any ideas and suggestions for future podcasts. Thanks again for listening.